Good afternoon. It's great to be back at the Singapore FinTech Festival this year. I look forward to this exciting week every year, although by the end of the week I'm usually completely exhausted. And thank you for joining our exciting panel discussion on what's happening in the cross-border payment space and how these innovations are benefiting local and regional economies. If we look at Asia Pacific as a region, the region is becoming increasingly more interconnected when it comes to mobility, commerce, supply chains. But when it comes to payments, we still see a lot of friction. There are too many disparate payment rails, as an example. If we are to look at cross-border settlements, a lot of settlements are rarely done in local currencies, which leads to additional complications, and the list goes on. At the same time, we are seeing a lot of innovations and solutions being introduced to address these challenges, make cross-border payments more interoperable, and get us closer to a truly integrated economy as a region. Today, I'm really excited. We have an absolute all-star panel with panelists who do not need much introduction. Starting with my right, Zubin Krishnan is the CEO of BigPay. Dr. Pipatpong Poshyanonda is the president of Kasikornbank. Dr. Pipatpong goes by Po. Dr. Feagin is the president of Ant International. And Akihiko Sato is the deputy head of Finance Business Strategy Division at PayPay. And Akihiko goes by Aki. So thank you, Zubin, Po, Doug, and Aki for joining this panel. So today, this is what I like to do. I like to tee up three high-level topics across the role of cross-border payments in enabling the local and regional economies to grow and what innovations are happening in that space. Two, how important is the collaboration across various participants to make the future of payments a reality? And lastly, what more needs to be done for us to get closer to a more sustainable and inclusive payment system? And we will engage with the panel to hear their perspectives and have an open discussion. So let's start with the first topic on cross-border payments boosting regional and local economies and what innovations we are seeing. I'd like to first go to Zubin. So Zubin, what are you seeing in the market in terms of innovations and how the challenges are being tackled in this space?
Great. So it's interesting. Southeast Asia has really been at the forefront. Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific as a whole has really been at the forefront of innovation, right? And what we're seeing, and I think what we're going to see, is a multimodal future, one where innovation is going to sit with incumbency, right? And we've seen a lot of innovation over the last 5-10 years, mostly around rails, right? You know, I'll take my own country, Malaysia, as an example. Cards infrastructure and cards rails have been around for yonks, for decades, right? And those are the incumbents. But post that, you know, we had real-time bank-to-bank rails back in 2011. We saw the introduction of closed-loop rails with e-wallets around 2013, 2014. You know, the likes of Touch and Go and Boost coming in and introducing those. And then we have the development of Do It Now QR, which is an open-loop QR payment rail. And we're also seeing, you know, players like Alipay coming into the market, big supranational schemes entering markets like Malaysia. And on top of that, we're also seeing innovation in terms of these rails connecting with each other across the region. So we've had bilateral arrangements with Singapore and Malaysian governments so that, you know, I can go out and take my Malaysian QR device and scan it in Singapore and pay. And we're seeing the emergence of things like Project Nexus, which is a global initiative to try and bring all these domestic real-time rails together. So there's a lot of rail innovation here, and I think we can send money instantly in a lot of these markets and across a lot of these markets. Now, the real next step of innovation is going to be not so much the rails, but the train stations. How do people get on board? How do people use these various rails, right? There was a point in time when I remember in Malaysia, there were like 15 QR codes at every merchant, every point of sale. So you could go to like a store and then pay, and you try and scan, and you wouldn't be able to scan because you didn't know what to scan. So how do we make that's a job for me as a B2C player. Is how do I make customers' lives easier, and how do I ensure that they can take advantage of these rails? So that's where I think the next innovation is going to come forward. Biometrics, wearables, all sorts of, and tokenization allows for that on card schemes. All of these new innovations around the customer journey, I think, is where we're going to see a lot more innovation.
Okay, that's fascinating. And take a cue from your last comment around what the customers have been experiencing. Po, could we go to you next? Could you share perspectives from the story from the customer perspective? What are they looking for, and what more do they need to see?
Yeah, I think based on the current situation, I think the region is becoming smaller and smaller. People travel a lot across the region, especially on the retail side, and they expect more and more seamless, fee-free payments across the region. And innovation has been there, but we still have a fragmented of payment rails, even though we still try to cross over between these payment rails. But consumers themselves, they would like to have experience like they feel at home. Once they have familiar with the experience, they're doing all the payment at home. Once they go abroad, they would love to have the same experience doing so. For the SME side, I think cross-border payments expectation is increasing, even demanding on the SME side because of we have all the commerce platforms. SME try to embed themselves into various platforms and being in everywhere in the region. So they even expect lower FX fees and faster payment and settlement. I think those are the key of the success of the SME side. For large corporate, a lot of experience coming around the payment transparencies and also liquidity management from the corporate side. They're looking for a lower cost and predictable rates, especially they want to go towards local currency and settlements as well. So these are the perspective of various kind of consumer, SME, and also the corporate from the regional payment coming up.
Yeah, thank you, Po. Staying on the same topic, do we go to the far end of the region, Japan? I'd love to hear from the experience of Aki and Japan. Japan is fascinating in that I remember even 10 years ago, we used to carry a lot of cash because digital payment wasn't prevalent in the market. But now, the digital adoption has gone through a very rapid pace of proliferation with the emergence of very powerful forces like PayPay, as an example.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Well, PayPay is the top share of the QR code payments in Japan right now. And as for the international businesses, payment fintech businesses like us tend to balance between developing new state-of-the-art services to users and steadily providing familiar, cozy, steady services to users. And on the domestic front, of course, PayPay is seeking to develop new services to users. But when it comes to the inbound or outbound travelers, we'd rather want to provide familiar, cozy services to users because foreign travelers are generally very conservative, preferring to stick to their own payment methods. So against this background, when you look at the foreign tourists visiting Japan, they have three payment options: cash, credit card, and QR payments. And but there are still so many merchants in Japan who have not introduced credit card payment system, but have been enrolled to PayPay QR code payment system. So as the number of foreign tourists visit Japan well exceeded the pre-pandemic level, this is a huge opportunity for PayPay because they can use, through the Alipay system, we can provide directly the same method that they use at home, thanks to the alliance with Alipay Plus, with PayPay. And as for the outbound tourists, Japanese tourists traveling abroad, we are considering providing exactly the same services to them. Namely, they can use the QR code payment system as they do, as exactly the same experience as they do in Japan. We are now doing this, considering that in the near future. So this is a very important mission to provide familiar, cozy payment methods to users, both external travelers and internal travelers. Thank you.
Okay. Fascinating. We are hearing a lot about the importance of customer experience. You're hearing words like cozy, familiar, as if they are back home getting these things done. Doug, we'd love to hear about what's the ultimate experience we are trying to provide to our customers. Maybe it's seamless payments, maybe it's even beyond payments. Could you please share with us your views on what we are trying to do for our customers?
Sure. Well, this is a hugely exciting time in the world of digital payment and digital commerce. I agree with my fellow panelists, all the things that are mentioned here. It's fascinating. We've seen, obviously, in my parent companies in our home country in China, digital payment is ubiquitous. So in many ways, world leading. And it's so exciting to be here in Singapore, where Ant International is based, because we see in Singapore and throughout Southeast Asia the development of digital payment incredibly rapidly. It's amazing what we've seen over the last several years, 5 to 7 years, as this has developed at an incredible pace. And today we actually see digital payment being used broadly within the different countries in this region, and increasingly cross-border, and increasingly more easily cross-border, which is great. So the question you posed is, like, what's the ultimate experience? What's the best experience in digital payment? I'd like to answer that from the merchant side and then the consumer side. On the merchant side, what do merchants want to do? They want more customers, and they want to drive more transactions. Digital payment can actually enable that to happen. But they need to go beyond payment. They need to be able to offer their customers new products, new services within their home app when they travel abroad or when they go abroad. And merchants are increasingly able to do that. We're seeing the increase of digital coupons, new products that they can offer, even mini programs that show their whole suite of services to customers when they travel abroad. And I think this is actually the panacea for merchants, where they can bring in new customers, they can increase the uptake of their sales with the existing customers, and that's kind of the ultimate thing for them. For the consumer, I'd like to take an example of just the casual traveler when he or she goes abroad. What are they looking for? Well, they're looking for a more user-friendly, readily available experience when they go to a foreign country. And let's face it, when we all go here, even coming to Singapore, which is quite easy to travel to, you start asking yourself, how am I going to get around? What am I going to eat? What experiences do I want? And through the digital payment, now you can make your travel experience so much easier. You can readily find the services that are available, and you can pay in many ways through your own digital app and a convenient payment system that you trust to enjoy the experiences that you want within that market. And importantly, you can go beyond the things that maybe you've done before and experience new things. Try out, maybe do bungee jumping, maybe do like some kind of new cuisine, try something different. So I think this is what we see as the kind of direction of digital payment and digital commerce, and look forward to kind of fulfilling that.
Get that. Thank you, Doug. There's It sounds like there's a lot that our customers and the merchants are looking for, and we're all striving to provide a great experience, which can only be done through close collaborations across various participants in the system. So could we go back to you, Doug, linking this to the ultimate experience we're trying to provide? How do you see the importance of collaboration within the whole system across various participants? And what are we seeing in the market today? What more do we need to see?
Well, it's an interesting question. I'll just give you a perspective on that from where we sit at Ant International. And our services like Alipay Plus and Antom are really trying to connect different consumers and digital forms of payment with merchants in other countries. And that really requires a lot of collaboration. And there's a lot more work to be done on that. The first element of this is just the most straightforward, which is we really need to collaborate with all different forms of digital payment. That may be folks paying with a digital bank, like Kasikornbank, or with PayPay, where they're used to using in Japan, or BigPay. And these consumers are used to what they're used to paying with. And they want to do many more things with that. And so what we're trying to do is enable that collaboration, where anyone's consumers can go and travel abroad, do different things, and enjoy it. But it requires a lot of work. You've got to deal with different protocols, different technology, different risk management, different regulations in different countries to really make it work. But you have to collaborate between the consumer channel and then on the merchant side, the merchant channel. And so acquirers and all the participants there to connect with the merchants and enable those digital solutions. And so at the top level, I think that's the most important form of collaboration from what we see in terms of cross-border payment. Interestingly, though, what you've seen here in Southeast Asia is the advent of real innovation on behalf of governments. And governments have introduced national QR codes, indeed, in many of the countries represented here. And they've come up with new schemes. And this, in our view, needs to be part of the collaboration, because these national QR schemes can enable many more merchants to participate and a much broader scope of payment. And so we think it makes sense to collaborate with these governments, enable connection between different private sector payment channels and the national QR schemes to make it a much richer experience for everyone. So there's a lot of collaboration between all the players in the private sector, the private-public sector cooperation, all needs to kind of happen.
Okay. Thank you, and sounds quite complex as well. And I guess a related question I'd love to hear from the panel. How do we govern all this, these various participants, getting to work together, make sure they are playing their parts, and the cooperation is as efficient and optimized as it can be?
Yeah, I can take that. I think everybody wants to get things done and get things moving and get payments flowing across borders. A lot of people don't like to think about what to do when things go wrong, right? And that's critical. Now, simple enough with organizations that are supranational. They exist above domestic markets, like Visa or MasterCard or Alipay Plus. There are defined sets of rules when there is fraud or there are disputes, and all participants adhere to that, right? Now, what happens when you have a cross-border connection between two schemes, right? Between, say, Thailand and Malaysia. Now, what happens when a criminal acts in Thailand, spends in Malaysia, and action needs to be taken cross-border? Now there's no more supranational entity to govern that, right? So those are the things that we really need to consider as we push out a lot of this cross-border cooperation. Now, on Project Nexus, which is the Bank of International Settlements led project to connect real-time rails across multiple countries. Now, they're placing particular emphasis on this, but because of that, it's going to take a few more years for them to roll out, right? So it's really about, I think in terms of collaboration, around governance, rather, it's really about, we need to temper some of the speed of going to market and rolling out to consider some of the things that will happen in unfortunate incidents of fraud and disputes and so on.
And Aki and Po, anything further you'd like to add from Thailand and Japan perspectives on collaboration?
I would like to add on the regulation side a little bit because besides connecting all the infrastructure together, rules and regulations are still, not equally the same among the countries, especially on the identity side, on AML, on fraud systems, and those kind of things. I think it's the basic infrastructure that needs to be there for the cross payment to grow. Okay. You want to add anything?
Yeah, the other three talked about the very hard things, so I'm going to dare to focus on the more grassroots or softer things. When you try to provide a payment service to users, of course, the issue of what kind of system you use does matter. And in that sense, mutual recognition between users and merchants is one of the most important aspects, actually. Think about it. For users, it is very important that they understand and know that they can use their payment method in that country they visit. And for merchants, they have to know that the payment method can be accepted and the payment method is properly advertised to the users. So if either of these conditions is lacking, no GMV, general merchant value, will happen in the first place. So we believe collaboration between issuers and merchants and sometimes the governments are very important. So promotion by the government is also important at the airport or something like that. So we are promoting this kind of collaboration as well in tandem with the hardware collaboration with other issuers or the government. Thank you.
No, thank you, Aki. We are getting...
Yeah, I just add, I mean, I think in terms of all the kind of protection of the system, there are new challenges that arise every day and new things that we need to do to confront them. And so things like, in digital payment, I think you start with consumer data and protecting consumer data within different spheres. And it's interesting because you see different regulations coming up in different places. Japan will have its own regulation, Thailand another regulation. I think it's very important for us to all communicate there and come up with the best ideas, because the bad guys are going to be out there chasing us all the time to break into systems and to get ahead of us. And so we need to be kind of comparing notes across countries and come up with the better solutions. And then that goes through the whole payment system. So when you go to payment transfers and the like, all the policies around AML, KYC and then AML, we have to also continue to evolve because all of this becomes more complicated, and the bad actors there are innovating, unfortunately, at the same pace that we are. So I think it's important to maintain that cooperation and also have a very active dialogue with the regulators to see what needs to be done next.
Yeah. Tagging just a little bit onto that, it's a great point. Let's give some concrete examples, right? So Malaysia is undergoing a FATF mutual evaluation this year and the next on anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing. Now, you imagine the surface area of risk has for cross-border money movement has expanded so rapidly. Stable coins, crypto, you could take, cross-border exchange of rewards points from one rewards vendor and loyalty and rewards vendor in Malaysia and Korea. That's a way to get money across, like through QR payment at a POS, right? And the regulators are justifiably getting a little bit concerned about this pace of growth and how we're going to cover all those things. So I think also sharing in terms of our efforts and building technology to abate these and mitigate these risks is important as well.
Okay, fantastic. We are getting a lot of questions from the audience. I'm quite tempted to go through the questions, but why don't we touch upon the third topic first, and then see if we have any time to address some of these questions. One of the questions to to give you a quick preview, is so collaboration is one thing. How does competition work within this group? And how do we preserve margins as we try to do more for our customers? But let's see if we can get to it later. The third topic that we promised the audience that we will get to is how do we get to a more sustainable and inclusive payment system, including even more remote and less traveled destinations? So, Aki, can we go to you first on this question? I mean, of course, Japan, there's nowhere that's less traveled anymore, with the surge in tourism and so forth. But how do you see this dilemma for the industry?
Yeah, the social or inclusive or sustainable it's a very challenging topic for us. The payment business in Japan, PayPay's main focus has been how fast we can grow in the QR code payment market in Japan. However, we now recognize there are a lot of non-profit digital payment areas which have been unaddressed, such as digital benefit payments from local government to local residents or digital donations. And our efforts so far to cover this area are still limited to Japan. But if there is proper, appropriate international collaboration between local payment businesses and between the public and private sectors, I think we can make our life even better. For example, when a big natural disaster like tsunami or a typhoon occurs in one country, the people in neighboring countries can make donations more quickly than via bank if payment businesses collaborate internationally. So that kind of thing we have to tackle with in the coming future. Thank you.
Thank you. And any other perspectives to add to that from the panel?
My perspective would be around if we want to be inclusive on the digital payment, definitely the digital literacy of the consumer would be the key. Otherwise, it will all killed by the fraud or misuse of the payment data. I would like to add on that.
I have a point.
Go ahead.
Just around sustainability, I think one of the key things on sustainability is the economics of it, right? I think it's only across payments where almost all stakeholders expect it to be as close to free as possible, right? From the regulators who want quicker adoption of digital payments means to kind of consumers who also want it to be as close to free as possible. But the reality is that it costs money to maintain, right? So I think what's key is ensuring that, from a regulatory side, sometimes when they introduce new innovative methods like open loop QR, they say for merchant adoption, let's keep prices low. But then at a point, or free, but then at a point when they want to introduce pricing, there's a lot of political pushback. It's hard, right? So we need to remember that all players in the ecosystem need to remember that, in order for this to happen, it must be economically viable, right? So I think that's going to be a struggle for and challenge for the payment system to overcome. If they truly want to see this innovation being sustainable and continuing, right?
Yeah. I guess first I would echo that somewhat in that I think when you design new solutions, be it on the consumer side or the merchant side, they have to be suitable, right? So they have to be the kind of solutions that actually work for the consumer or the merchant. And sometimes that'll be free, sometimes it'll not be free. And it actually requires people to implement and to create. So I think it's very important to kind of look at things through the eyes of how are they actually used and what makes something long-term sustainable and long-term workable. And just a couple more thoughts on that in terms of how the systems can really work. First, when you see the new ideas and the continued innovation in terms of digital technology, there are always new solutions, in some ways better solutions, that do things in a different way. But one of the things that I think will create a more sustainable long-term solution is to have openness and interoperability. And so I think that we need to, and we will see more openness of different forms of systems. So, for example, we have QR code payments rising in different areas around the world, especially here. And still, in lots of other areas, you see the prevalence of card-based payment. And they both are digital payment in some way. There probably needs to be more interoperability in different systems in different ways. And different interoperability between the way people operate, they hold their accounts, the way they transact, I think we'll continue to see new innovation. And it's hard to make things interoperable. It requires a lot of resources, and it's expensive in some ways. But I think it'll really lead to longer-term sustainability. The second thing is, one thing that we see here already in Southeast Asia is inclusion of all different types of businesses down to the SMEs. And I think that SMEs have been, in some ways, an afterthought to the digital payment system. And they're kind of enabled today in that maybe there's a QR code, standard QR code that's acceptable. But that doesn't mean that an SME can actually participate. And I think we need more innovation, especially to the MSMEs, the micro small enterprises, to enable them to use digital tools and to participate in the same way as larger merchants can participate in today's system. And so I think there needs to be more investment, more innovation to enable that. And these SMEs, indeed, are the backbone of the economy. They represent the vast majority of businesses out there and a huge portion of GDP in the country. So I think sustainability requires that inclusiveness of these other actors as well. So those would be a couple things to look at as to how we can drive it all together.
Excellent, amazing perspective. I feel like we're just getting started with our discussions, and we have these questions coming in. I'd love to spend some time to answer those questions as well. But we do need to wrap up in 3 minutes and 50 seconds. So could I ask the panelists, maybe up to about 40 minutes each, to share perspectives on what keeps you up at night, whether it's fear, threat, or something really exciting that you just cannot wait to see? Maybe starting from Zubin again.
I think what keeps me up at night is two things. I think there's a lot of really interesting new ways that we can get humans interacting with the rails, right? Biometrics and wearables and so on. That's going to be exciting. The other thing is the risk, the ever-expanding surface area of risk, and how are we going to ensure that we can mitigate and we can kind of control any fallout that occurs if any unfortunate incidents happen, right? So those two things keep me up.
There are two things from me. Firstly, is the stability of the real-time payment systems is quite a key. Any hiccups kill our payment system easily. The second, which is the most important thing that wakes me up every night, is the digital fraud. It can damage the system and the society and the country easily. And it's growing so fast. We need all the regulations and the solutions to attack this fraud. Thank you.
So.
Well, actually, practically, what keeps me up at night is because I'm usually on a plane, so I'm stuck up at night every night. So that's the actual practical reality as I travel around the world. But what do I worry about when I'm going to sleep? I would echo what you said about fraud. I think that the issue of fraud has become so much more complex, and we are constantly chasing new methods of how to detect that, down to people who actually use real solutions, but they're faking their way as a separate person, and that's kind of in some ways the hardest to detect, to like these deep fakes that are being created with AI today are so realistic. And we have our labs trying to stay out ahead of them, to figure out to detect deep fakes, and we're reasonably successful on that, knock on wood, but we got to keep investing and make it happen because it's a tough battle.
Yeah. And Aki?
Yeah, we are now considering, as I said, providing services to Japanese travelers abroad. And so please keep watching us. And as for risk side, payments businesses may not be directly responsible for this issue, but I tell you, there is a growing tension between tourism based on commercialism and the traditional local communities in Japan, ranging from never-ending traffic jams to environmental impact to a spike of local general prices like accommodation or restaurants, which is squeezing out the Japanese tourists, domestic tourists. Well, Japanese tourists have been the source and cause of this issue in many parts of Asian countries over the last 50 years or so. But now it's our turn to struggle. So that's our, nightmare for you right now.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. What an amazing panel discussion. I will surely be kept up at night tonight thinking about what the industry is all trying to do for me as a consumer. It's really exciting. But thank you so much for joining this panel. If you could all join me in thanking our wonderful panelists and this great discussion that we've had. And thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much for that, Seo Young, and those amazing panelists.